productive grit. We want our students to have grit and resilience and not just jump over to the tool.
There, but actually it's the stuff in here that matters when you go into a new scenario or the next.
And how she used each piece of feedback.
They've already learned it and now they can improve. And those were the study group, I feel like the third group in that paper.
I want to acknowledge the country that Juliana and myself are joining from, which is Wujak Noongar Boodja, and also where Matthew's joining from, which is the Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation. It's really important in the Australian context that we be aware of Indigenous knowledge systems, and especially when we're talking about artificial intelligence, which has really been crafted through a Western knowledge lens, that globally Indigenous knowledges are respected within these machines in the way that we prompt, generate outputs, so that we can kind of move more towards that global harmony of different knowledge systems. So thank you, and kind of over to Tina, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Celine. Delighted to be joining this call today with amazing colleagues talking about this topic of metacognition and AI. My name is Tina Austin. I've been a lecturer for the last decade in biomedical research and the past 3 years with AI and medicine and AI and critical thinking. And a lot of you may already be familiar with some of the work I've been doing.
Juliana, after you.
Okay, so I'm Juliana Peloche. I've got a long journey with AI before generative AI. As Selena pointed the other day, almost a decade, and that scared me. I said, "Oh my God, it is almost a decade in this field." My background is as a primary teacher, and then I got my master's in the US with teacher leadership, and then my PhD in Australia in AI in education. So I've got a bit of all the best worlds, school world, higher education. I was a lecturer until last year. Now I'm working as a senior learning advisor in AI literacy at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia. Matthew.
Me. Okay. So, hi everyone. I'm Matt, and I was a history teacher for about 20 years in Sydney, in Australia, and I've just jumped out for the last year to start supporting schools in their adoption of AI and planning and strategy and policy. And one of the amazing things I see is just that how many schools are open and willing to start the discussion, regardless of all the other stuff that they have to deal with, because they're starting to realize that AI isn't just a teaching and learning issue anymore. It's actually affecting student well-being, parent engagement, all sorts of areas of school. And so really excited to be here and chat about metacognition and AI and in that wonderful context of education.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So lucky last, my name is Selena Dondi Tenakov. So I'm a secondary school teacher as well for about 10 years. So I was an English teacher with a dash of careers, but then parenthood kind of moved me into the university space. And now I coordinate uni prep in schools, which is a university preparation and enabling pathway program that we offer across 45 high schools in year 11, year 12. So I really sit in that transitional literacy space, and that's where that metacognition has a really vital piece to play when students are been through 13 years of formal school, and then how do we effectively prepare them for first year university to be successful.
Fantastic.
Can I just share something before we start talking about the hard thing? I just wanted to share my screen because I was coming back home yesterday, and I came and I ride my bike to work in and out, and this was what I was seeing on the way back. So I was coming back, the sun had just set, and then it gave me that idea of how small we are.
Sorry, Juliana, I think you might be sharing the wrong screen.
Am I?
Yes.
Oh no. Hang on.
So just start again.
Start over. Let me see if I'm sharing the right way.
It's great. We've got all your banking details now.
The one? Are you seeing what I'm saying?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes, that's beautiful.
So yeah, so I was coming back from work yesterday, so I've got the privilege of riding my bike in and out, and that's what I was saying. The sun had just set. We have the privilege to have the sunset on the sea in Western Australia, And that gave me the idea of how small we are before this all of this thing. But on the other side, it gave me the idea of how we are all on the same thing with AI. So if you that you are watching this, if you ever feel overwhelmed or just remember that we are all in this together, and this metacognition subject might be a bit too much for you, but remember, this is all part of our universe. This is all part of us. Unfortunately, there is no way back. But every time you feel uncomfortable, just look at an image like this because it really calmed me down and made me feel like, we got people over there that are just like us, looking for the best, looking to help everyone that is around us.
That's cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you. Maybe I should start with defining for our audience what metacognition actually is. Thinking about thinking is thrown around a lot. And as I was talking to someone earlier, there's human metacognition where, as your students are thinking about how they're thinking, reflecting on things. And then there's AI metacognition where AI systems are reflecting on their outputs. So for the longest time, the conversation was, well, AI it can't really have metacognition. What do you think?
I'll jump in if that's okay, and just say that I think the way I've tried to talk with schools about it is to use AI to improve human metacognition. So you can't outsource that part of thinking about thinking and thinking about what you're doing, even if you see evidence of it in AI. So having said that, I do also see evidence of metacognition in AI, but it's the evidence of the thinking rather than the thinking itself. And it's sort of, I mean, in the busy schedules of teachers and school leaders and things, it's just they sort of stop at that point and go, oh, come on, like this is getting too theoretical and stuff. But it's important to say when we use AI, yep, there's trails and evidence of metacognition that's left there, but actually it's the stuff in here that matters when you go into a new scenario or the next scenario.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I can build on that, I had an interesting moment with so I also 1 day a week teach pre-service teachers. I'm not sure of the term that's used in the US in terms of initial teacher education. It's it's one of the most rewarding things to do. So we did a mind mapping activity, and I've just got this standard one I do across several of the courses that I coordinate, where we just start with the word apple, and we do a physical butcher's paper, text is out, go for a mind map. And then I layer in, okay, if you were to give that same prompt to an AI tool, yes, it can generate your mind map, but what's missing? And one of the students said to me, emotion and memory, that when they were doing the mind mapping as part of their group work with another peer, when they were drawing up words to put on that mind map, there was an emotion or a memory attached to it. When they started thinking about Snow White and the apple, or they started thinking about, I don't know, Sir Isaac Newton, there was emotion and memory attached to that. I don't think the AI tools have that yet. We always have to use that word. I think that's really important when we look at metacognition in the early years of learning. Yeah.
I think something else that we have to think is that how is AI trained? How many brains we actually have in AI? So when we talk about metacognition, I like to say that it's the user's metacognition, but there is metacognition there from many millions of minds that trained these machines as well. So it's another way of seeing this. I agree totally, Selena, and I think that emotion and this kind of, and I don't think AI will ever have because this is what makes us human. So one thing is an analog thing, and another one is it's a biological thing, right? It's completely different, and I think that's what makes us more important in this aspect of this interchange of ideas and use of AI.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I just found this article today about, how some researchers argue that the LLMs are capable of some level of metacognition, but I also agree with you both that, it won't be truly the way that humans are self-aware, and what was already built was based off of previous humans' self-reflection. So I know we can go a long way with that discussion, but it's really fascinating. So the next thing I want to bring up is um, about how you may have put it in your teaching. I know, Selena, you mentioned about like a mind map that you do. From something you've shared in your classes, how have you been embedding metacognition in different ways?
Mm.
Do you want me to go
I
with
can
my
offer a
classes?
couple
I'll
of
go.
thoughts. Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
No.
Sorry, just beat you. I just beat you. One way has been to in rethinking assessment and refocusing away from giving all the marks and all the focus to the final product and shifting some of that to the process, which we have been talking about for quite some time, right? Like since the internet and Google came out, but we've sort of ignored it up until this point in some ways. Now it's saying, okay, well, if students are going to use AI, which they absolutely will, what evidence of learning can we gather through that process of interacting with it? And so some schools and some teams are looking at how they might use that conversation with AI as part of that portfolio and saying, actually, we do want you to use it and we do want you to take screenshots or export a PDF or whatever to show us what that thinking looks like at the start of the process, during the process, and at the end of the process, so that you can actually see some improvement over time. Because the AI does have memory too, right? You literally can tick or untick the do you want it to remember things for you. And now that you can organize things into projects in ChatGPT and other platforms, it's starting to offer us the chance to remember in those sorts of thinking flows as well. So that's one way, is that it actually becomes part of a student's evidence of learning portfolio process, whatever you might call it, so that they hand that in either along the way or with the final product. So they're starting to show that interaction, which hopefully leads towards some metacognition too.
Very nice. Very nice. Do you often use the memory option, Matt, for ChatGPT?
Look, I've got it switched on, and I do actually find myself asking more and more, hey, remember when we talked about
Yeah.
Yeah.
dot dot dot, or it just does, because you start talking about, if I put in an acronym for an organization I had to teach it about several days before, like a teacher association that I might be preparing a presentation for or something like that, and I start to work with it to get some ideas on how best to structure that, I might put in the acronym and it remembers what we've talked
Mm.
about because I've talked about it and put the acronym in or something like that. It's just a simple example, but yeah, it's starting to learn me, and I am fascinated to see what it thinks about learners as they start to use it
Mm.
over years and years, even in a really safe, protected environment. Like by the end of their 12th or 13th year at school, it might know that student much, much better and how they think than the human people that work with them.
Yeah, and can I just add, this is more of just a curiosity thing for me because when I use it for I use the memory for the same purposes as you. Sometimes I find that it will cross over, like bleed into one topic and something you want to keep separate. So you open an incognito and then you do your work there. But sometimes it will cross over. So there's one day you talk about one topic and let's say one class, one thing, and the next day it's a totally different thing and you didn't, like, let's say you pasted a Zoom link or something there, and it happened to me where it brought the old Zoom link from a different class, and it was just something to be, I think, mindful. I don't know if it's happened to you as well, where things cross over.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's
And I
right.
think that I think a lot of people go, oh, see, AI can't do blah, 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 blah. And you're like, hang
Yeah.
on, I make that mistake too, like all the time about bringing the wrong links and things like that across. So yeah, it's apples and apples kind of stuff. Sorry, Selena, I jumped in just before you did.
No, that was a fantastic example. Actually, I'm going to talk about something different based on what you just said then, Matt, in terms of by the end of 13 years, I know this is not verbatim of what you said, but it will know that student. That's actually my concern. So if we think about the schooling experience of a student during primary school, and I imagine this is the same, Tina, in your education system, you have a different teacher every year, and even within a year, you might have four different teachers. And then when we get to high school, you have six different teachers a day. Now, I understand that that can be a cognitive overload for some students because they're having to code switch, especially during
Mm.
those early adolescent years, and it's overwhelm. But I worry, and this is why I don't agree with the personalized learning argument or strand of AI, um, that it'll get too narrow for our students. And again, it comes back to that human experience. So I think it's very much that balance. So when I'm using this in my class, it's probably the last 10 minutes of a class because I've done a lot of human work to lead up to it and then we go, okay, now let's try that out in a model. And it depends which model they use because across the school systems here in Western Australia, there's very varied use of which tools are allowed and not allowed, and which are paid for by subscription by schools, and which students are using free models. So can have very different outputs.
Absolutely. I agree. And I'm with you there, Selena, on using it selectively. That's why with the framework that I've developed for my classes, some lessons need AI or may be benefit from AI, some will not have AI. And I put it towards the end. I start with the main things I want them to learn, and then laptops away, and then sometimes we'll have laptops open. Okay, you can critique AI here, and then self-reflect on what you thought versus then now look at AI's output. And I also agree with you, and I hope I'm not interrupting anyone right now, but I also agree with you on the last thing you said about remembering the student over the years. I try and go between ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity and 5 other things. So it's not just one model learning everything and all of the things about what I'm asking it. So I've spread it across different things. I use it for different things just so there's not what OpenAI doesn't have the full footprint of everything I'm doing for this one class, even though OpenAI has shared my work on their website, which is nice of them. But I just also like to keep things a little bit spread out. And I agree with you, Selena.
You do what we say, share the love, just a bit here, a bit there, just not give to everyone. I wanted to build up on what Matt said as well, because our university is moving into a completely new curriculum, and it's based on portfolios, right? Students need to join portfolios. They need to join evidence of their learning. So this is becoming something huge for us, especially in terms of feedback. So, and it's through this feedback that we get to know if students are actually using metacognition in their learning. So I've got a very good example from a student in performing arts, and she, I probably shouldn't say she, should say they, because I did not ask her permission to be sharing this, but I think it's
She
such a
or
good
he or her or him. Yeah.
But what it was asked for them to use AI in the assessment, but just show the way they used. What I found amazing is that no more guidelines rather than these that I'm saying were shared. So what came out of this was a screenshot of her interaction with Copilot. So our university uses only Copilot. So the interaction of Copilot and how she used each piece of feedback, ignoring or accepting the outcome, the outputs. I thought there was that's where we could see learning happening, how she linked to the material that she learned in class, how she accept or not. Like she wouldn't be able to have those kind of decisions made if she didn't know the content. If she didn't. So I said, this is a perfect example of how we can see the augmentation of students learning with these tools, how we can see thinking, overthinking. It's just, I thought was quite amazing. And what you said, Selena, about the personalization, it's interesting because at the beginning of AI, like before generative AI, before everything, the greatest promise of AI was the personalization of learning in education. This has always been the biggest promise. And now we are kind of debating if this is actually something that we want.
Mm.
And I totally understand because there are jobs, there are roles that are part of the teacher job to do, right? There are things like I can hear lots of people saying like, no, but I wouldn't like someone, a machine grading my students' papers because I know the background of that student. I know the big picture. AI sees that black and white. So that's something that I really argue about personalization as well.
See,
So
I'm torn on that as well because in a New South Wales context where we have very high stakes final exams for secondary education in particular, actually, we want that. Like I've sort of put it out there, I think publicly a couple of times, that I wouldn't be surprised if our curriculum authority does adopt AI markers, because actually when I go to do HSE marking for those exams, which cost $130 million a year to run, by the way, just as a little footnote, and we forced all these kids to do exactly the same exam at the same time with some tweaks for adjustments, but essentially it's the same thing at the same time. We walk into that exam training and they say, now forget your school rules, forget your personal approach, forget how you like to mark in your school or system context. You are now a NESA marker, you're a curriculum authority marker, and here are the standards we're going to have, and we have to apply those consistently. And if you're not consistent with the other markers, then you get a little conversation and we pull you back into alignment. And what does AI do? It says, just tell me what you want and I will just apply it black and white consistently. And I wouldn't be surprised if students start saying in that particular context, actually, we want AI markers because we're sick of this variation between what this teacher A does and what teacher B does, because it should be, hey, if there's a marking criteria, it should be consistent. So, there's those sorts of contexts too, where I'm fascinated to see where the future goes.
I'm thinking about my year 5 students, like, the ones that I spent the whole year with, and getting to the end, and this is a machine this is a completely different. For HSC, go for it, like really, because we shouldn't have any kind of bias when we are marking this. This is a high stake kind of exam. So for this, I would say totally yes. But as a primary teacher, I prefer to have my input on my marking with my students.
But see, I'm still torn on it because I actually want some bias. Weird to say, but I want some bias in that assessment process too. I would rather get rid of the exam and have other methods by which we assess students in total. But there are issues with that as well. So yeah, it's I'm torn in multiple fun and devastating ways.
I'm curious, is this mostly about privacy, the concern, Selena, right? Because privacy, right? Because privacy is one of the reasons I like to split up different AI models and not have it completely know everything. But I can understand Matt's point where the promise, like Juliana mentioned, was about personalized learning. We were doing this so that everyone, whether how neurodivergent or how different they are, to have a benefit from AI, right? So I get where everybody's coming from, and for the sake of time, I'll move on to the next topic, which is about productive grit versus struggle. And I believe the question was, what's one misconception you've seen teachers or students have about that when it comes to metacognition?
That's probably Selena's favorite thing to talk about.
That's my favorite thing. I suppose, and so I want to put some context around grit versus struggle. And again, it might be it might be something that just happens in Australia, but historically, when the word struggle has been used, it's students who are struggling to read, struggling to write, struggling to communicate. And in the schools I've worked in, those students are then streamed into the bottom classes. And they are given a certain level of work that seems appropriate for their struggle. So when I started seeing this term kind of take hold in this AI conversation, knowing that it's got a long history, the term productive struggle has a bit of a history before that, I found it a bit of a contradiction or an oxymoron to put productive with struggle. So I kind of thought of it in terms of it being a deficit, and I wanted to move it into a positive language, and that's where I kind of came up with the term productive grit. We want our students to have grit and resilience and not just jump over to the tool that might do the output for them and go through that grit and grind of the stages, I suppose, the levels of metacognition. So G is kind of about that growth mindset. R is that differentiation around their readiness for the task that you put in front of them. Intrinsic motivation has a lot to do with metacognition and the way that we develop that in our young people. And then the T is the teacher has to be in charge of that. And I suppose it kind of loops back to the personalized learning as well. If the teacher's creating rich tasks, then hopefully our students will be intrinsically motivated to stick with that grit rather than rely on a tool. So that was kind of my framing around that. And really, really would love to hear what other people kind of think around that as well.
Can I jump in now that we've had a little pause? Because I'm going to have to go in like 30 seconds. I'm so, so sorry because there's so much more we could talk about. In fact, I want to have this conversation more once I'm back from Japan and had a
Yes,
lovely time and
please.
things like that. Yeah, so, so sorry, guys, but I thought I'd jump in at that pause moment so we can kind of
Go for
delete
it.
this little bit.
Go for it.
Have a great chat. I'll chat to you all soon. Thanks so much. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Enjoy. I think that there are, I loved the way you said about intrinsic motivation, and I don't have the answer for this, but I struggle with creating this intrinsic motivation in the age of AI when students can actually offload part of their work to the machines and get it done in seconds, and then getting that question back. And I'm talking about higher education students getting the question back, like, why should I spend hours and hours doing this if this can do it in seconds? I've been getting this question more so often now from the teachers that I've been working with, because students they lost a little bit the sense of the meaning of learning. Like, why are we learning? Why are we doing this? And I think that's where the intrinsic motivation comes from. When we start understanding why learning is so important, and you put learning in the middle,
Mhm.
and then all of this struggle that they call for learning to actually happen becomes an uncomfortable space, but a valuable one. So, because it's got some kind of rewarding at the end. But if we can't get there in this space of creating this uncomfortable moment and getting the reward, this is the struggle for me. Like, how do we actually create this intrinsic motivation in students that lost the taste for learning?
Yes, I agree. And that's where I think where we draw the line where, students would feel lost and unsupported, where, you're just challenging them for the sake of challenging versus like what Selena was describing, providing more intrinsic motivation. So I think those are fascinating points that you both mentioned. And then lastly, let's get to some of the audience questions. I dropped them in the chat, Celine. I don't know if you saw them or you want me to paste them
Yeah, I've got
again.
those. No,
Okay.
that's great. Thank you.
Feel free to take a stab at whichever one you like. I don't want to read it out loud, or if you want to read it yourself and read it out loud for the audience.
Did you want to start with one, Tina, actually?
Um,
The one that kind of jumped out at you the most?
honestly, what cognitive work are you offloading to technology, and what are you doing yourself? So I actually try to, like, for my classes, I'd like to do a lot more of students self-reflection through presentations, and that's where they get to like really bring in their unique wow factor, their unique personality to the class. And it's nothing to do with technology. We've tried this with technology, with PowerPoint, with all these different tools. There's no way, it doesn't improve them in any way. Just having them draw out what, like, we had students do little TED Talks around scientific things they've learned. So they bring merging what they learned in science to a TED Talk presentation. And they start with like a worm hook or something that happened in their personal adventure to school. And then they bring in like some scientific theory, and none of it is enhanced with AI. All of it is just them and their personality shining and them communicating to other researchers very complicated biomedical research topics in a very simple 10-minute talk. And that's what I want them to learn, is just how do you simplify these complex topics into something that, maybe AI can help them with like breaking it down initially, but the rest is just their charisma, their grit, their personality, their themselves, really. And that's one of the things I want them to do when they're writing their letters. What is it called? Their essays to medical school, and their essays where it's just their story. It's not something AI can write for them. AI can't write for that's one thing we don't offload. So I don't know if I answered that. And then what do I use? Tools, there's like plenty. I could talk about it for half hour, but I want to give time to you all. So um, back at you.
I think I'm gonna be between the two questions because we're talking about tools as well. And one of the things that it might be something that some teachers don't actually use anymore, but I still bring this up when I'm talking to teachers. The SAMR model, and I think Celine and I had a conversation about the SAMR model not long ago. And every time I see the use of AI as a substitution of something, I said, this is wrong. So first ask yourself, is this something that I could be doing with Google without any kind of AI? And if the answer is yes, but it will take me a little bit longer, okay, how long more would that be? I would say, don't use AI. Just go through a little bit longer and go through the grit that you need, the resilience that you need to go through this and to analyze the data, to analyze the outputs, because that will bring learning, right? So every time I see the substitution, I say just drop it. I really focus on the augmentation of learning. How is this tool augmenting your learning, and how can you prove that this is happening? So if you can't really prove, and you are just using this as an excuse, drop it. Use your own. Use your own understanding, use your own intellect, because this will bring some fruits in the future. So that's how I do it. Like that's how I ask people to drop. And things like are very tedious. For example, writing an email, and you know, I work for as an editor in a journal, and I sometimes need to write emails, and I write quickly, and I said, "Oh, can you please just shape this up in this and this way?" Why not, right? If I don't have time, it's just like something tedious, just do it. But everything that requires me reading an article, I read an article, the entire article. Like I don't just, especially if it's an important article I'm using for a paper, I want to know what I'm talking about. I don't want to I don't want to give just what an AI gave to me, right? I want to
Absolutely.
bring my perspectives into it.
Yeah, I love what you said because those were kind of like I built a framework of a couple of months ago around the same thing about what is the problem you're trying to solve, and then I bring in AI. So that's the Unblooms recording that Simone will make it visible later. That's the one where I've talked about like kind of like what you just mentioned, where like what are we trying to do? Does AI make it simple? And then we work our way backwards. And sometimes we don't use it. Sometimes, like you said, if it's something that's tedious or takes more time or the value is not there. I don't like AI summaries for papers either because the devil's in the details and the summaries are just not
Yeah.
focused on the right things. Like I just, someone earlier today made a video with Notebook LM, and I it just irked like I feel this thing with I'm sure you've seen Notebook LM videos. They just hyper focus on one part of a paper if you give it a paper or like your lecture slides, and it will just skip out three-quarters or two-thirds of it. And some people are like, oh, just use that for preparing for your exam if you're a student. And I feel like, oh my gosh, you have to tell them to be a little bit more cautious because this is not a comprehensive way to learn a class, and it will jump
Mm-mm.
between, especially if you've taught any like STEM or whatever classes. You want the order of things are important. And if you're using not just a summary tool like a notebook LM tool, it will just mash up and remix the whole thing and say, these are three simple bullet points. And like I just did one on LinkedIn on AI on AI metacognition just for the audience to see how it's messed up. And LinkedIn won't let me upload a longer than 1 minute video, but
Mm.
or 3 minute video. But if you watch the whole thing, it's just shambles. It's just all over the place. So yeah, unfortunately that those videos don't go viral. The ones that go viral are the like either they hype up the tool or
Yeah.
they're like extremely against it and it's like don't use AI.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I still do some things like I don't know if you can see, but that's a notebook. Like these are all these are all my articles, like the articles that things that I'm reading, and I still take notes by hand.
nice.
Like I don't even use, AI or anything. I still take because there are yeah.
Yeah,
So it's still
nice.
like there are things that I'm very old school, but I have a feeling like, and there is studies talking about how much more you can keep when you do yourself, when you write notes, so it might sound like Just the other day, I went to a meeting and a colleague said, "Oh, amazing! Look, the only person in the team that is responsible for AI brings to the meeting a notebook, not a laptop." And I said, "Yes." So this is concerning. What's wrong? And I said, "Well,
Cognitive offloading, you don't want to offload things to just AI. That's another paper I saw this week where it was saying AI makes you more dishonest, it makes you worse, it makes you bad. There was one that came out this week, and I have yet to post about it, that makes you worse at your job. And it's really about, well, if you're already lazy at your job, if you're already taking shortcuts in your job and you're using AI to do more shortcuts, then yes, it's going to make you worse at your job. But if you, whereas like Juliana, very effective and very efficient, then you know what's important. So you're using AI in the most efficient way. So it's not going to make you worse at your job, and I think that's the difference. And unfortunately, again, the viral stuff is the shock factor stuff, like the brain rot paper, which I was hoping if we had time to talk about, but I feel like we've mentioned this so many times about this paper, this preprint that the authors called up the news to discuss. There were three study groups. One study group did not use AI before and after. They were fine. I think there was one that didn't use it. I'm sure you know the paper, right? I
Yeah.
don't need to explain it again. And so ultimately it was about, yes, if you weren't using AI before and then you used it later, like kind of like what Selena's approach in her classes and what I do in my classes, I introduce it later, then students are like, oh, now this is a good shortcut, or they've already learned it and now they can improve. And those were the study group, I feel like the third group in that paper that did better than the A and B, which were just either not using AI before or they were using AI before they learned how to do it the normal way. I don't know. Feel free to tell me your thoughts.
No, it's interesting. I did show that paper to my students as a way of actually deconstructing a journal article or
Mhm.
a not so good journal article. And we were able to talk about the peer review process using that article rather than the content. So that was just took it on a completely different angle there. Um, but I think when we're talking about handwriting versus using a device, again, all that research when there was this big push to go one-to-one laptops came out about, the opposability between the thumb and the finger and the nerve that runs to your cognition to ignite that. Um, and whether or not you can get that same effect with the typing. So we might want to link that article onto the
Yeah.
website when this is posted. I suppose when I think about, so just going to one of the other questions about tools that can spark the best metacognitive strategies for students, we've already said at the start of this conversation that the metacognition, talking about it, is just so big. And I feel what's happening at the moment is that we're lumping all of education into one bucket instead of looking at metacognition for 5-year-olds, metacognition for 13-year-olds, metacognition. And I say that because I've got each of those age groups in my life, and the way that I see my children using it as a primary school student and a middle school student is very different metacognitive um, things going on with them, aligned with the chemical development going on in their brain. So when someone says the best tools for metacognition, I'm kind of like, why do you have to? I'm still very much like, if we want to develop self-awareness, good planning, good evaluation, good reflection, we should still lead into the pedagogical practices that we've used for the past few decades that have worked quite well. We've just not maybe taken as much notice of them. And I think that's what this kind of discussion is bringing into light, is we can't ignore that research anymore. About visible learning, about scaffolding, about feedback loops. We can't ignore that anymore if we're going to use AI tools effectively as a integration of our learning, not a bolt on to our learning. So I know that probably doesn't answer that person's question, but I think when you're looking at tools, it has to be developmental specific and go all the way back to, Piaget and Bruner and all those great theorists who looked at instruction through the lens of different stages of childhood.
I think you did answer, because it's not about the tool, it's about the way you use the tool, right? It can be the same tool being, helping you with your metacognition and everything, and then just completely offload of your work. Same tool. It depends on the user.
Mm. And just one more thing in terms of offloading, however, from a personal point of view, I've found that I'm kind of in this academic world now that I never expected to be in. And so I have to do research as part of my load. I don't know if it's the same for you, Tina. You've got to have so much teaching percentage, so much research percentage, and so much networking percentage. And again, as the busyness of my life outside of my salary hours means I never get to my research, and I never have for the past 5 years. But generative AI has given me the opportunity to catch up, and I feel really empowered as a mother in that space. And I'm not guilty. I don't feel guilty about using those tools to help me kind of catch up on what has kind of lagged in the past 5 years. I'm
Absolutely.
not saying I'm going to publish a paper using generative AI, but I'm going to help it with the planning and the rewriting and the editing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I agree. When I first started teaching a long time ago in higher ed and university, one class, I would get one class like maybe last minute, like, oh, can you do this? And it would take all of my time because I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it, and I was up every night trying to keep up with the latest research, and it was a lot to do. But then when generative AI came along, I was suddenly able to teach like across 3 different disciplines and like bring in new things, and then still do all these LinkedIn posts and still do go to conferences and talks and stuff. And like kind of like you, I didn't expect to be thrown into like doing all this research, but I find it so fascinating. Like not being a contrarian all the time with like research that comes out, but I like to look at things differently often. And like I'm always curious, like, oh, maybe there's another way to do this. Like just now when you and Juliana mentioned the what was it about privacy and personalized learning being the promise, right? And I get that too. And I'm thinking, well, what else can we do? I mean, like, okay, if we're not going towards personalized learning, we're looking at ethical privacy, like ethical issues and privacy. How else can we empower the students, right? So I'm just thinking in my mind, oh, 50 new things, and then generative AI is there to like run the trials in the background and then get back to me. I don't know. It's exciting. So
It's exciting.
Yeah, I in class yesterday for the final class, I had my pre-service teachers. I gave them 5 different tools. So I broke them into groups, and each of them had an online application. I'm not going to mention them here to give them any sort of kudos, but they had to do almost like a SWOT analysis. So, and I kept talking about data and privacy. They're like, what the heck has this got to do with AI? I'm like, this should be your fundamental questions. When you introduce something to a student, that should be your first question, especially if you're under the age of 18. So, okay, we'll end there. And Simon,
I have to
you want to
go,
wrap up?
guys.
This
Otherwise,
has been
right.
so
I'm
fun. I
almost the
really hope we
train.
can do this. Let me stop recording and say thank you to the audience. And, thank you for listening.
AI and what they say. Oh.